Hi everyone, and welcome to the special edition of Dev in the Details. I'm super excited to be here with someone who knows AI inside and out. This is a Predibase co-founder and CEO, Dev Rishi. Dev isn't just a founder, he also holds a master's degree in computer science with a focus on AI and machine learning from Harvard. Uh, Dev spent his career building products that push the boundaries of what's possible in enterprise AI. So today we're going to relive this startup roller coaster, the sparks that led to Predibase, the proud wins and lessons learned, and also what's next now for Predibase. Now that we have joined forces with Rubrik. So let's think of it as, a behind the scenes conversation about startups, scaling, survival. This type of stories you rarely hear outside of late night founders chats. I'm sure those exist. Okay, Dev, so let's start at the beginning. What was the moment that sparked Predibase into existence?
Yeah, first of all, let me just say, Natasha, I'm looking forward to doing this with you. I know since you joined the team at the beginning of the year, you've been excited about us telling your story in a better way. So excited to try this out as a medium, and hopefully it goes well.
Yeah.
When we started the company, Predabase started in 2021, which it might feel like ancient history at this point, was before LLMs actually came out. And we started the company really with the observation that there was a technology that was very powerful, and but it was only really used inside of leading tech companies. And when I say leading tech companies, I really mean the top 10 in the world, not even the top 100. And that powerful technology was at scale deep learning. And so deep learning was a branch of machine learning that worked well on unstructured data, that worked really well on high volumes of data records. But it tended to be very difficult for organizations to really productionize without having a lot of experts and PhDs on staff. So we started the company in early 2021 with a mission to democratize access to deep learning and really get more organizations to start to use it. And my background and experience was I'd been working in product at Google. And so I'd seen machine learning and deep learning work both internally and was also a PM on Kaggle and Vertex AI, where we were building external products for customers. And I saw what the friction looked like. And I joined forces with my co-founders who had been building machine learning platforms and open source projects while they were at Uber. And so when we really started the company, we took some of the core work that they had done in making machine learning easier to access inside of Uber. And we thought, wouldn't it be great to build an ML platform for the everyday enterprise externally? And so we started and we raised our first round of funding from Greylock, and we basically began the journey from there.
Wow, it's tough to imagine that the company is only, 4 years old at this point? You said 2021?
That's right, 4 years old. Not hard for me to imagine in some ways, but definitely a lot has changed. And the 4 years, of course, in AI has been unlike any other 4 years.
Yeah, startup world, things change. The only constant thing is change.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now let's talk about what are some of the toughest challenges that you faced in building an AI infrastructure startup, especially in San Francisco, where all the founders, all the AI techie people are. Competition is insane. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, I have to be honest, and every founder should probably know that what's hard changes every 6 months, especially if things are going well, then there's going to be a new thing that becomes the hardest thing in the bucket in order to be able to tackle. I think at the very beginning, what was really difficult was hiring and hiring very well. There was a period where after we started the company, we didn't make a hire for our first 2 months. And I'll tell you right now, that was not intentional. We were actively trying to hire, but we had a really high bar towards the talent that we were going out after. And we were really looking for cutting edge ML engineering and researchers. And even in 2021, that was a very difficult group to be able to secure and get access to. And so at the beginning phases of the company, just knowing how to hire, there's no customer, no go-to-market resource, no one else who's going to have to put as much trust in you and the company as the first couple of employees that are going to join you in this multi-year journey. And so I think it helped us refine how do we want to tell the story and really what is our identity going to be as a company. But, I will say that the challenge changes every 6 months. And so I think once we felt like hiring was a part of the company building experience that we had started to crack, the next challenge became go to market in a large way. We were all product and engineering folks, and we had to start to learn a bit about marketing and sales and quotas and commissions and everything that we didn't really know too much about before.
All the
Uh,
boring. Yeah.
I actually don't think it's the boring stuff, but it is the very net new stuff. The stuff I'll say that they don't teach you in CS class. And so it was a lot of new things, I think, to figure out. And so that was probably challenge number two. And then I'll just say challenge number three. I know you asked for one, but I can't help myself. The third challenge I'll say is during the 4 years we started the company, the world really shifted, especially in our space, AI. So being able to figure out what the right focus was and not spread ourselves too thin, I think was the final challenge. I think there's a famous quote that most startups die of indigestion rather than starvation.
Wow.
And so it's actually more difficult to be able to focus on a small sliver of things than rather than picking maybe the wrong individual sliver. And so that was the final thing that was a real challenge for us. But
Wow.
certainly, a lot of evolution.
Yeah, that's a lot of challenges. And now that I think about it, it's what is it, like a COVID year, a post-COVID day, like year? What was it? Everybody was at home.
Yeah, I like to say that we started the company right around the same time or just before the vaccine came out in early 2021. And so, the entire world was remote. We were all on Zoom initially, even though one of my co-founders and I were in San Francisco, another co-founder in Seattle. So, AI was changing, COVID was changing. It was a really dynamic first part of this decade.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, and then on the flip side, I guess, what are your, some of the most proud moments you carry with you through all these years?
Yeah. I have three again that come to mind, and so I'll try to be quicker about them. But the first proud moment was the silliest, I'd say. It was very early into the company, but we used to do these company all hands every week. And Natasha, you know them now. We still do them every other week. But we used to do these company all hands. And at the very beginning of the company all hands was just the three co-founders catching up and talking. And
Hmm.
then we added, the fourth Zoom box, which was our first hire. The proudest moment for me, I remember, was when we joined a Zoom call and there were all of a sudden there were 7 or 8 boxes that showed up on our all hands. So there were
Hmm.
7 or 8 screens. And that was the first moment for us that I think things stopped feeling like a random project on a piece of paper in a slide deck and actually the start of a company. The second proudest moment that I think we've had was very unique to us. When generative AI came out and large language models came out, there were essentially lots of companies there were cryptocurrency companies that were pivoting into AI. There were traditional non-enterprise AI companies pivoting to AI. Everybody was trying to become part of this AI bubble, and I think that's people started to speak a little bit more and more about putting out noise and other content out there. We had always prided ourselves on putting out high quality content. And for a little while, that means we weren't putting out content as fast as everyone else. So we need to figure out how do we rise above the noise. And so the thing that we ended up doing was an exercise we called Laura Land. Laura Land was essentially just we took a couple months and we trained hundreds of models across many of different types of data sets, and we just started to show that small language models outperformed large prompt engineered models. So we took the leading small language model at the time, Mistral 7B, and we started to show it actually outperformed GPT-4o prompt engineered. And Natasha, it was a really interesting moment because we put out this data and these models with this tweet. I want to say, on a Tuesday afternoon, and initially it got pretty good reception, and it was exciting. People cared about it, and we felt good, but it wasn't anything crazy. And then 24 hours later, we woke up. We literally went to bed, woke up the next day, and we saw Jan LeCun, the head of AI at Meta, hugging face. Everyone had retweeted this same graphic, and we had gone viral. And it was the coolest feeling, I think, that everyone started to care about what we did. So that was the second proud moment. And I'll just, in one sentence, say the third proudest moment since then has actually been hearing our customers speak about our product. So every webinar and every talk that they've done, I've really enjoyed those. So
Yeah.
that's probably the quick summary.
Wow. I can imagine
Yeah.
there's a lot of proud moments. I would probably add a few from my bucket if I were you, but it's your podcast. All right. Well, Dev, let's, I guess, can we try to sum up maybe the last few years into one lesson that belongs on a motivational poster or, I don't know, warning label? What would that
Hmm.
be?
I like the warning label side of it, Natasha. So I'm going to go with when the generative AI hype wave was coming out, we had a company offsite maybe 2 or 3 months after the real launch of ChatGPT. And there were a lot of questions, I think, about what generative AI would be and whether or not we should pivot, from what we had been doing previously, which we call declarative machine learning, into generative AI. And I remember one of the offsite sessions that I created, the title slide was "Nobody Cares." And so that's what I'd put on the warning label. And you might think nobody cares is a very demotivating fact. But I actually think as a startup and entrepreneur, it's one of the most invigorating concepts you can have. What I mean by nobody cares is like your real value, like your real strength and differentiated advantage as a startup is you don't have any real baggage. You don't have any incumbency. You shouldn't have any real pride, to be honest. When I say about what I mean pride, like you shouldn't have any sort of like holy cows that you don't want to go ahead and slaughter for finding success. And that allows you to move very, very quickly and allows you to go and make statements that can test extreme ends of the market to get you the signal that you need the fastest. And so the reason I frame it as nobody cares is like the second half of the side. The first, big text is nobody cares. And the second half is, and it's our job to make them care. To me, it's actually one of the most exciting things about a startup is like you start off at a concept where no one really is giving you a ton of credit necessarily out of the box. And people like you, maybe they like your open source software, but if you're talking to 100 customers, 98 of them have not heard of you before. You're Predabase, you're a 25-person company that started a year and a half ago, and they are X traditional enterprise that's been around for over 100 years. I think that it's one of the coolest experiences that you have to change people's minds about that. And I think that one mistake people make is that they get bothered by the fact that nobody cares. And I think instead, like when I think about what you need to do, it's you need to find truth. You need to find what it is, the thing that you can say that actually makes the biggest difference in their lives. Because too often you can have a conversation with someone and, they like you, you like them. It's a pleasant conversation, but you haven't pushed the envelope anywhere because you might be afraid of, of doing that. And so, I think embracing the fact that you are an underdog as a startup really helps you a lot. Embracing the fact that nobody cares initially day one around you as a startup, I think really helps with that.
So it feels like when nobody cares, this is when you start hiring marketing. So people start hearing about your startup.
That was another big learning. I will share that too.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay. Do you think during this journey, there were moments that completely changed what you think about leadership and product focus and go to market and just priorities?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest and most obvious moment was the one that I referenced, which was ChatGPT being launched.
Mhm.
So we had been speaking a little while about how deep learning is an important technology, and all of a sudden, OpenAI released the single best example of deep learning. And the example was so good that it became more important than even our message. The idea that large language models could be used out of the box, I think they democratized deep learning better than even we were doing, right, in 2021 and 22. And so I think we need to figure out, well, what does that mean from the market standpoint? So the first big thing that happened was ChatGPT changed our thinking on the market, and we had to figure out how do we want to react. The way we figured that out was we'd have a number of customer conversations every week. In the early days, we'd have maybe a handful of customer conversations every week. And we started to track every single customer conversation. Were they talking to us about deep learning and declarative deep learning or LLMs? And it was in a matter of like 2 weeks, the narrative completely changed to where 75 to 80% of the conversations, and this is like end of 2022, early 2023, people were only talking about LLMs. So we knew we needed to go into that space. And that was the first, I think, and biggest pivot overall in the company. Mm-hmm. The second thing that I'll say that like changed my mind, my perspective just on leadership, I'll say, because I think this was more on product and market. On leadership, actually, was bringing in go-to-market leaders kind of into the company too. It was a really eye-opening experience to know what you could do with marketing. And I think early founders should really spend a lot of time thinking about marketing, because I think about marketing as the way that you get over the nobody cares part of the narrative, to your points. And so that was definitely something that, really changed our perspective too.
That's a cool take on this whole thing. So
Mhm.
I guess, is there anything that you wish the startup dev, like, I don't know, from 2021, knew that current dev knows now, besides the fact that nobody cares?
um, Honestly, there's probably about 200 different things that would come to mind. And I think it's one of the reasons that serial entrepreneurs are such a competitive advantage. When you first start a company, for anyone who's listening to this and starting a company, my guess is like every day, like, when you start a company, probably 90% of what you're doing is a mistake. And you like start to hill climb, at least, in my view, a lot of what we were doing early on at the very, very beginning of the company, we were making a ton of mistakes. And you start to hill climb and you start to make fewer and fewer mistakes over time, and you get smarter. But I find that the only way to learn the startup lessons was for us the hard way, which was like making those mistakes. That said, like, I think one thing that I really think about, especially for technical founders, that I wish startup dev knew was I was told that sales is very important when you're early on in a company, meaning you want to be able to, of course, build a product and sell the product. Um, and I think a lot of technical founders have this impression of what sales is, which is you're convincing somebody that they should use or buy you. So you're in a conversation and whatever they're saying, you're kind of nodding yes, and you're, trying to be as polite as possible to get them to say yes. Instead, there's this concept that exists in enterprise sales called challenger sales, where you actually challenge the other person, the customer, about, well, why would you need this product? Why would you? Why are you even taking this call? Why are you taking 30 minutes out of your day today to speak to me?
Mhm.
And this can actually feel pretty uncomfortable for first-time technical co-founders who are, let's say in their late 20s, early 30s, getting challenged the person across from them that they struggled so hard to get a meeting with. But what I learned through this experience is you're not going to be able to just convince people to buy products repeatedly by being good at talking. Being good at sales is not about being good at talking. Being good at sales is really about being able to understand your customer and their pain extremely well. So fundamentally, being good at sales is actually being really good at asking questions, and getting to the point where the customer reaches a conclusion rather than you having to push them there. The reason that this was the biggest lesson for me is I think that, we actually were able to work with a few customers because they liked us and respected us. But I don't think we actually learned enough about what truth was in order to sell our product and what product market fit was until we started to be able to sell the customer that would, speak to us and say, look, I'm skeptical. And that we actually were able to change their mind, not by persuasion, but by really good questions and discovery. So that's probably the biggest thing I think I wish startup dev had known.
Interesting. So, being a marketing person, I guess, here's a question that's actually not on the script.
Sure.
What is the question that usually gives people the aha moment?
I think that the truth is that with different customers, you always have a few different types of journeys that you go through. But I'll give you an example of like one of the buckets of questions that I think gives people this aha moment. I think one of the types of questions. So one question I love to ask at the beginning is, well, why are you deciding to like take the time to talk today? This isn't an aha moment, but it's a great opportunity to do some discovery and like have the customer actually articulate and think about the fact. Because so often, like, has this ever happened to you? You're, on your calendar, you see another 30-minute Zoom meeting, you're just hitting yes, okay, join.
And soul
So
search,
often,
yeah. And you're not doing it for like a $20 gift card, obviously.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so often people I think are just joining the Zoom meetings without actually having taken a deep reflection on why are they here. And so starting that way, I think actually primes you for a really good conversation. Because look, everybody's busy. The fact that they're taking 30 minutes, there was some reason that they decided to take the conversation. Your goal is to figure out why. The second question that I think can lead to the aha moments is you describe a pitch and you tell them a little bit about the problem you want to solve, and they're gauging a reaction. And maybe the reaction is lukewarm or neutral or something in that kind of ballpark, which, let's be honest, a lot of conversations tend to be lukewarm. People don't want to offend you, and people aren't that emotional on a first time customer sales call.
Hmm.
I think one thing that can lead to an aha moment is asking someone, well, what would you do without this product? Or how does your life change if you, like, how would you go about life without this? And I think what that forces them to say is, oh, without this, I would need to do X. And then you have the perfect set of follow-ups. Well, what's wrong with X? And they start to articulate your business case for you. So those are a couple that I found really helpful.
Okay, well, it's a good learning for me as a marketer as well. Okay, so I have to ask this question. So Predibase has been about simplifying model deployment and fine tuning.
Mhm.
Is there maybe like a customer story that you can share that really captures the value that Predibase delivered?
Yeah, I think that there's a few different ones actually, and I'll give credit to the organization for definitely writing up a number of them. Let me actually see if I can share one of the two that I really like. So we have a few different ones that I think are great examples of the customer stories and how they used us. But the one that I think is actually particularly emblematic is one of the first customers that did a case study with us, which is Checker. So Checker is a company that does e-verification and background checks. Actually, at Predabase, we use them as well for being able to run background checks as needed too. And what this company sits on is an amazing trove of proprietary data that really looks like essentially criminal records, charges, legal data about all sorts of people across the United States. And what they needed to do and what they wanted to do was start to use generative AI in a much heavier way inside of their organization to take the type of like data munging and background check information and processing that was traditionally done by humans and start to do it with large language models instead. And so it's a great use case. Lots of documents, lots of different types of unstructured data, and you need to make a decision based on that unstructured data. So I'll go ahead and skip towards the end of this story rather than how they got to where they did. And I think the reason I like this case study is it's really emblematic for what I see a lot of organizations go through. They started off with a model, GPT-4, and it got to a certain level of accuracy, and it was a little expensive, and it was pretty slow. And they, really worked on this for quite some time, prompt engineered it. They established a baseline, but their entire business was around this idea of doing really well across unstructured documents. And so they wanted to go further than what GPT-4 was giving them out of the box. So they used Predabase. They fine-tuned a small language model. At the time, they fine-tuned Llama 2 7 billion, and they've since updated to Llama 3 8 billion and experimented with many other models. And they noticed a dramatic improvement in accuracy, a significant reduction in latency, and a significant reduction in cost. And so the reason that I like to tell this particular case study is that it's really a great example of one of the few times in software where you can sort of have your cake and eat it too. You can actually get a more accurate model that is less expensive and faster. And really the thing that you need to do as a trade-off is you need to tune it on your data. So I thought they were a great example for one of the types of customers we worked with.
Wow, that's a very high note. I don't even know like if there are anything else that needs to be said here. But I still have a few questions that personally interest me, and I'm sure a lot of other employees of Predabase. Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about a successful exit. So someone told me that exits are sort of like dating. It's about, the right timing, the right chemistry. Very often it's about luck as well. But exits are not super easy to navigate. And well, I can only say this from the point of view of an employee who transitioned from an early stage startup to, with all of our early startup environment and fast decision making and the mindset, and who became like an employee of a giant org like Rubrik. But I'm super curious. What is your take as a founder, as a CEO? What was the thought process like in deciding it was the right time, it was the right chemistry with Rubrik, and it was the right step?
Yeah, and let's be honest right at the beginning. Like good exits or startups, even though we read about them in TechCrunch and CNBC, if you think about the overall volume of companies that are founded every year, good exits for startups just statistically aren't necessarily that common. And so a huge element that plays into every good exit, I will 100% say, has to be luck. It's about finding the right people in the right circumstances at the same time. But that's obviously not a satisfying answer. You can't say luck is, all components towards it. I'll just say that it plays a factor for where things go. I think for me, and just like reflecting on the Predabase journey, how this conversation really started for it, I've known a lot of people that have had both good and not necessarily good exits. And for the ones that have good exits, I think we've all had a similarity, which is at the time the conversation started, we weren't looking for an exit. We were pretty focused on building out our core business and working towards the mission that we had. And so when the conversation initially struck, it was purely opportunistic. And actually, in the first conversation, I think I was really just curious to get to know the folks on the other side of the table a little bit better. I was, still pretty, I think, committed to the idea that we would be building out, the standalone business and the product and the platform. And we had just been coming at a period where I think we had really started to discover a lot of repeatability across our customers and had gotten some great case studies. There's a lot of excitement happening. And so the interesting thing was when the conversation first started, it was really serendipitous. Uh, and I think in terms of like my thought process, determining whether or not it was the right time, the right step, and the right chemistry, that those things became so situational that the reason we ended up, I think, starting to go and have a lot deeper set of conversations was it was really after the first couple that we noticed that this was potentially uniquely good fit, that we were actually really excited about the ways that we would be able to work together. And so that started to, lead us towards that journey.
Well, I guess then the natural question would be, if you say that this is uniquely good fit, like why Rubrik? What about Rubrik's platform and vision made it such a good fit for Predibase's next chapter?
Yeah, definitely. Walking into that question, I think that there are three things that I always think about when it comes towards like why Rubrik for why I think, and I wouldn't say this was an immediate conclusion, but why over, and in fact, my immediate thought was maybe this may or may not be a good fit. I'm not sure, but I think that as I started to dig deeper into three key reasons, the first was the product and technology. The reason I say that is like if you think about Predabase, our favorite customer quote, which I know you've heard a number of times, is generalized intelligence might be great, but I don't need my point of sale system to recite French poetry. So
Hmm.
really kind of taking the idea that general intelligence is great, but most enterprise organizations need custom intelligence towards their specific use case and task. They don't need something that can write poetry as well as draw a picture. They need something that can work through documents highly efficiently, as an example. And we think our entire thesis is that the way you get there is by tailoring your models to your data, similar to how Checker did. So the reason that the first thing on the product and technology side was interesting was Rubrik as a company sits, its foundations are really in the data backup and management space. So it has the data for a large number of the most sophisticated organizations in the world, as well as a security layer and a permissioning layer on top that makes that data even more useful. So I'd say from a product and tech standpoint, it kind of aligned with our thesis on how we saw AI. The second reason was, I think a little bit less obvious, but I actually think the go-to-market timing is really interesting. And so if I had to be honest, I think that when we think about like go-to-market, our mission was to democratize deep learning. A lot of Predabase's customers were still some of the most advanced tech companies. You could think of someone like Checker as quite an advanced tech company, Match Group, a number of different startups as well, that I think were really solid customers for us. But there's a huge opportunity that exists in the traditional enterprise and the global 2000, which are massive organizations that have been on the cutting edge of like, I'd say software and IT deployment for some time. And in my view, are starting to come on to AI now. They're just starting to turn on and have started to over the last 6 or 12 months. And what I think is really compelling about Rubrik is it has, it combines that technology with a world-class go-to-market engine that already has the attention of a lot of these types of companies. And so to me, that actually was really compelling, was intersecting our technology with the enterprises that are starting to come online. And then the third and final thing I'll just say was actually maybe even the biggest factor over a longer period of time was the people and the culture. Rubrik built a phenomenal company, that went public in my opinion, a pretty short amount of time. And the founders, the executive team, absolutely still embody that entrepreneurial and founder spirit. And so that was really compelling, I think, for us to be able to join.
Yeah, totally agree on the culture level. Feels like it's a good fit overall. Okay, so now that we've been inside Rubrik for what, a few months now, 1, 2 months maybe. Um, One of my personal biggest surprises was how many meetings can fit in one person's calendar. What about you? What's your take? Like, how has your point of view shifted, and what surprised you the most?
Yeah, I think how many meetings can fit in a calendar is definitely one of them. I think the thing that surprised me the most, actually, at Predabase, we were a San Francisco-based Gen AI infrastructure company that raised money from tier one Silicon Valley venture funds and
Mm.
sold software as well to other really high advanced tech and software companies. And so, to be honest, we had a pretty like limited or biased perspective on the world. Um, Inside of Rubrik, we've started to talk to organizations globally, across the entire world and across all different parts of the AI maturity lifecycle. What I think has surprised me is just how early we are in the enterprise AI adoption lifecycle.
Mm.
You know, like Natasha, we're a Gen AI infrastructure startup, and I've spoken to a number of different companies that in the last 6 months had actually like banned generative AI internally. Not because they didn't want to use it, but just because there was so much risk and around security and governance. And I think to me, like not a single company that we had spoken to in the last year would have considered banning Gen AI. And I think it just kind of indicated how much we were, I think, on the customer side, really speaking to folks that were on the leading edge. And now what's really, I think, become clear, apparent, been a bit surprising, but also to me underscores the opportunity is how many organizations are starting to become online, like I was saying earlier. And so to me, I think that's been probably one of the biggest surprises as we go from Silicon Valley SF based infrastructure company to now part of a greater engine.
Yeah, that sounds like a dream, actually. So, looking ahead, what excites you most about, combining Predibase's AI platform with Rubrik security platform? Like, say, if I check back with you in a year, and let's schedule that right now, um, what do you hope you could brag about on stage?
There's a very specific thing that I hope people. So today, people think about Predabase, and what we've proven out is like we're an extremely efficient AI platform. We get you great latency, we get you great accuracy at a great cost. What I want people to think about us 12 months from now as part of this Rubrik team, which really has kind of its foundations in data and cybersecurity, is to have people think about Predabase and associate us as the trusted AI platform.
Hmm.
And so trust really being the core of a large part of the value proposition that I think I want us to be able to build the next set of product investments around. And the reason I think that's really compelling is generative AI on an infrastructure level is advancing so quickly. The cost of GPUs, scaling laws across models, the decreasing cost of inference, the proliferation of open source models, these are happening at a rapid pace. And one of the reasons I think that the enterprise is starting to get some of these advances, but at a bit of a slower rate than some of the other types of tech companies here based in the Valley, is because that there's just a fundamental set of trust gaps that happen when you're an organization that has over 100 years of business record, are a regulated industry, work with sensitive customers, and you're going to start to apply that. You need to know and make sure that your models are doing things that are aligned with the best practices in your business. You need to have an observability about where data is flowing through. You need to make sure that anything that's sensitive is not going to get leaked. There's a set of different concerns. And so I think to me, where I want to be able to get into is actually solve this trust problem that exists in AI. And I think that's what success would look like if we were checking in about a year from now.
Cool. Let's set the date and see how that goes. I hope it comes true.
Sounds great.
Okay, last one. I hope it's a fun one. Fun question. Let's imagine that you're at a coffee shop, peacefully waiting for your whatever you drink, chai latte, cappuccino, a cappuccino. A young founder corners you and starts asking questions. And you, being such a nice person that you are, you'll take your time and you will have an honest conversation with him. What is the one piece of advice you would give to another AI founder or entrepreneur that thinks about scaling?
Hmm. Um, it's hard because, as a founder, you get so much advice. And by the way, you get so much contradictory advice, all of which sounds smart. It's hard to know. It's hard to know like any one pure truth.
Mhm.
For example, there's people who advise, top-down enterprise sales is the way to go, or bottoms-up product-led growth is the way to go. And enterprise sales is dead. There's every part of the spectrum. There's different thoughts about when to hire sales, when to hire marketing. So first of all, you're going to get a bunch of different advice. The answer to most advice is usually it depends. The one piece of advice that I think is actually more pure in the sense that you pretty much always want to optimize for this, is that the biggest determinant of success for you is going to be your feedback cycle time, or your iteration velocity, might be another way to be able to put it. Basically, how quickly you're able to take concept, get feedback from customer, and update concept from customer. And I think, especially if you're an early stage founder, let's say in the first year of your journey, if all you did was obsess about iteration velocity, I think you would do the best job about being able to maximize your likelihood of success. If all you did was obsess over iteration velocity, you wouldn't care that much about probably, let's say all the different legal trappings and others you can get into. You might not care as much about like all the branding decisions you make on your website. But what you would care about is making sure that you speak to a customer and get feedback in a way that allows you to iterate on the product quite quickly. So you're going to force yourself to ask the right questions and even write out and have a thesis on what are the questions you need to get answered that would allow you to make the biggest types of updates down the line. And you're going to force yourself to have a high volume of customer conversations as well. So there's 100 different things to focus on every hour of the day when you're building out a company. And that makes it difficult. If you're in the first 12 months, focus on what is the feedback loop that you need to go ahead and get answered. Define what are the 2 to 3 eigen questions that you think would have the highest impact leverage if you got the answers on those. Figure out how you get people to be able to answer those. Talk to them as quickly as possible. Doesn't necessarily matter if that means that your first set of customers are going to be enterprise sales in a certain sales cycle, or if they're going to be PLG, few startups, and they're going to be much faster. Focus on whatever route will give you input the quickest, because as a founder, your most valuable asset is time.
Interesting. So I'm gonna use some marketing fluff words right now, but how fast is fast? Like, what's the good iteration velocity? Is there some benchmark? Is it like a couple months from feedback to production? Like, what is it?
So I'm sure that the correct answer to this is it depends, but I'm going to give you my opinion anyway, which is I think fast. Whenever I think about like how we plan and planning cycles, we used to do quarterly planning. First, we actually used to do 6-month planning. Natasha, we used to write out in September what we thought we would be wanting to do in February and March of next year.
Ambitious.
Does not work well. I genuinely think that when you think about like how fast is fast, you should be thinking about what do I want to be able to learn and achieve this week. So over the next few days, there was a quote that I heard from another founder that I love that was actually one of our unofficial Predabase principles at one point, or at least I tried to make it one, which was nothing takes longer than a week. And it's provocative. Obviously, many things take longer than weeks, and there's good reasons for things to take longer than a week. But you probably want to condense down everything you're trying to answer and focus on to what do I need to go ahead and drive towards truth on this week. I think it's a controversial statement, but my point of view would probably be fully focus on, if it's today's Monday and we're recording on a Monday, what is it that I can go ahead and answer that helps give me the greatest leverage by the end of this week, so that I know on Friday what all the types of changes I want to be able to make. To me, I think that's the best way, or at least what I've personally found to be the easiest way to think about it.
No, that's a great advice. Okay, well, Dev, thank you so much for sharing your story, the highs and lows, and everything in between, pretty much. It's super inspiring to see how Predabase went from an idea to a platform reshaping how enterprises use AI, and now how that vision is evolving inside Rubrik. And for our listeners and viewers, thank you for joining us on this super special edition of Dev in the Details. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, you can reach out to Dev. He's on LinkedIn, or to me. You can email us, and if you're feeling bold, you can catch Dev at the coffee shop and see if he'll share more wisdom over a chai latte. But just remember, NDAs still apply. Well, until next time, stay curious and keep building.
Thanks, everyone.